help. We've kind of met in the middle. Like, he's chilled out a little bit, but he's just down for anything. Like, he's so...
It didn't begin with fame. It began with silence. The kind of silence that doesn't just sit in a room, it presses against your chest, making it hard to breathe. The kind that feels wrong, like something is missing, but no one can explain what. On a cold night in a small town, long before the cameras, before the lights, before the applause, a little girl sat awake, staring at a door that never opened. She wasn't crying, she wasn't calling out. She was just waiting, waiting for footsteps, waiting for answers, waiting for something to break the stillness. But nothing came. And that's the thing about moments like that. They don't feel important at the time. They feel quiet, forgettable. But later, they become everything. That night didn't just pass, it stayed. It settled somewhere deep inside her, becoming a fracture, the kind that quietly shapes a life without anyone noticing. Because what people don't understand is this: some stories don't start with dreams. They don't start with ambition or talent or opportunity. They start with survival. She grew up in a place where nothing was guaranteed. Not warmth, not safety, not even the certainty of what tomorrow would look like. Every day felt like something that had to be endured, not enjoyed. And yet, somehow, that same girl would one day stand in front of thousands. She would speak without speaking, tell stories that didn't feel written but lived, stories that carried something heavier than words, pain, truth, and something else, something people couldn't quite name but could feel instantly. But to understand how she got there, you have to go back to the nights that felt endless, back to the silence that said everything, because that's where everything first started to break. From the outside, it looked normal. A house, a family, a life that blended in just enough to avoid questions. Nothing about it seemed unusual to strangers passing by. But inside, it was something else entirely. Because her childhood wasn't filled with bedtime stories or laughter echoing through hallways. It was filled with whispers, conversations that stopped the second she entered the room, names spoken in low voices, truths hidden behind careful glances. Her parents didn't live ordinary lives. They dealt in secrets. And secrets have a way of leaking into everything, even the spaces meant to feel safe. At an age when most kids were learning how to play, how to laugh without thinking, how to trust without hesitation, she was learning something different. She was learning how to stay quiet, how to observe, how to notice things others missed. Not because she was curious, but because she had to be. There were nights when tension filled the air so thick it felt impossible to breathe. Moments when voices turned sharp, when doors closed just a little too hard, when silence stretched longer than it should have. And somewhere in between all of that, she began to understand something dangerous, that the world wasn't safe, that people weren't always who they pretended to be, that truth was rarely simple. These weren't lessons meant for a child, but they became hers anyway, and they didn't disappear with time. They stayed, buried deep beneath everything else, waiting, because one day, those same lessons wouldn't just be memories, they would become stories. Stories that felt too real to ignore. It didn't happen slowly. There was no build-up, no gradual warning, no moment where anyone could prepare for what was coming. Just one moment where everything changed. The fragile stability they had managed to hold on to suddenly disappeared. Money ran out faster than anyone expected. Opportunities vanished like they had never existed in the first place. And just like that, life shifted. They weren't living anymore. They were surviving. The house they once called home was gone, replaced by something smaller, colder, and temporary. It didn't feel like a place to build memories. It felt like a place to get through the night. Winters felt longer there, not just because of the cold, but because of what it represented. There were nights when hunger wasn't just a passing feeling. It was a reality they had to face. Days when uncertainty followed them everywhere, like a shadow that refused to leave. And in the middle of it all, a young girl watched. She watched her parents try to hold everything together, even when it was clearly slipping through their fingers. She watched them carry stress they couldn't hide, fight battles they couldn't explain. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she felt it, every bit of it. Because when you grow up like that, you don't stay untouched. You change. You learn that nothing lasts, that security is fragile, that everything you have can disappear without warning. And maybe that's when it happened, the shift. The moment she stopped being just a child and started becoming something else. Someone shaped by pressure, by loss, by reality. And that version of her would never leave. There are things a child should never see, not because they are rare, but because they change something fundamental inside you. And once that change happens, there's no going back. She didn't step into that world by choice. She didn't ask to understand the darker sides of people, the fragile nature of trust, or the quiet ways lives fall apart. But her environment didn't protect her from those truths. It exposed her to them, slowly at first, then all at once. While other children were shielded from harsh realities, she stood close enough to see the cracks forming in real time. She saw how easily people could lie, how quickly love could turn into distance, how trust could collapse in seconds. And once you witness that kind of truth, it rewires how you see everything. You stop taking things at face value. You start looking deeper, questioning more, trusting less. There were moments that didn't feel real, situations that felt far too heavy for someone her age to process, but she didn't have the luxury of ignoring them. She carried them quietly, storing them somewhere deep inside without anyone realizing just how much they were shaping her. Because from the outside, she still looked like every other kid. Nothing seemed out of place. But inside, something was forming, a kind of awareness that most people don't develop until much later, if they ever do at all. It made her observant, careful, guarded, but it also gave her something unexpected, a voice. Not loud, not immediate, but patient, the kind that waits until it has something powerful enough to be heard. At first, it didn't look like anything important. There was no big moment, no sudden realization that would change everything overnight. Just small, quiet beginnings. A notebook, a pen, a few scattered thoughts that didn't quite make sense yet. But when you carry that much inside you, it has to go somewhere. And for her, it found its way into words. She didn't sit down thinking she was creating something meaningful. She was just trying to release the pressure, to make sense of emotions that didn't have names yet. And slowly, those words started forming something. Not perfect, not polished, but real, raw in a way that couldn't be faked. Because the truth is, people can tell when something is real. They can feel it, even if they don't understand it completely. And that's what made her different. Her words didn't sound imagined. They sounded lived. Every line carried weight. Every sentence felt like it came from somewhere deeper than just thought. That's when the shift began. The transition from holding everything in to letting it out. Not just as expression, but as connection. Because the more she wrote, the more it resonated. People started listening, and more importantly, they started recognizing something in it. Their own pain, their own confusion, their own unspoken truths. And without realizing it, she stopped being invisible. Her voice began to matter, not because it was loud or attention-grabbing, but because it was honest. And honesty has a way of cutting through everything. It doesn't ask for attention, it demands it.
It didn't happen all at once. There was no single moment where everything changed, no instant breakthrough that suddenly placed her in front of the world. It was slower than that, built through small stages, quiet performances, rooms filled with people who didn't expect much until she began. Because the first thing they noticed wasn't her presence. It wasn't how she looked or how she carried herself. It was her voice. Not perfect, not refined, but real in a way that immediately stood out. And there's something about authenticity. It cuts through everything, through noise, through doubt, through expectation. People started paying attention, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. Because what she was doing didn't feel like performance. It felt like truth unfolding in real time. And truth is rare. But with attention came pressure. Expectations started forming. Opinions followed. People began trying to shape her into something easier to understand, something safer, something more marketable. They wanted to smooth out the edges, soften the intensity, make her fit into something predictable. But she resisted, because she understood something they didn't, that everything she had came from being exactly who she was. The rawness, the honesty, the imperfections. That was the foundation. And the moment she let go of that, everything would collapse. So she made a decision, not the easy one, but the right one, to stay real, to stay grounded, to stay herself, no matter what it cost. From the outside, success looks simple, clean, rewarding, like a straight path leading upward. But inside, it's anything but that. Because for every moment of recognition, there's something else happening behind the scenes. Pressure, expectations, a constant demand to do more, be more, give more. And for someone who built everything on truth, that pressure hits differently. Because now it's no longer just about expressing yourself. It becomes about maintaining something, repeating something, meeting expectations that never stop evolving. Long nights turn into longer ones. Rest becomes rare. The line between passion and exhaustion starts to blur. And somewhere in the middle of it all, it becomes harder to breathe, harder to stay connected to the reason it all started. There were moments when everything felt too heavy, too fast, too overwhelming. But stopping didn't feel like an option, because when you've fought that hard to be seen, you don't walk away easily, even when it hurts. And it did hurt. Not always visibly, not in ways people could point to, but internally, deeply. Because success doesn't remove struggles, it amplifies them. It makes everything louder. While the world celebrated what they could see, she was dealing with everything they couldn't, learning a hard truth along the way, that fame doesn't fix anything. It doesn't erase the past. It doesn't simplify life. It just magnifies everything that's already there. Every story reaches a moment where everything feels like too much. Not dramatic, not explosive, just heavy in a way that's impossible to ignore. For her, that moment didn't happen in public. It didn't unfold under lights or in front of cameras. It happened quietly, in the spaces where there was no audience, where everything felt real. And in that quiet, the truth became impossible to avoid. She was tired, not just physically, but in a way that went deeper than that, emotionally, mentally, completely drained from carrying years of pressure, expectations, and unspoken weight. Because no matter how strong someone appears, there's always a limit. And when you reach it, you're faced with a choice: break or change. She didn't break, but she came close enough to understand what it would feel like, and that was enough. Enough to force a shift. Not loud, not dramatic, but intentional. She stepped back, slowed down, started looking at everything differently, not from the perspective of success or expectation, but from the perspective of self, trying to reconnect with something she had been losing along the way: herself. Because in the end, that's what everything comes back to. Not the recognition, not the applause, not the noise, but the person behind it all. And if you lose that, none of it matters. From the outside, it looked like a perfect rise, a story of success, determination, and achievement, the kind people admire without questioning. But what they didn't see was everything underneath. The childhood that shaped her, the experiences that rewired how she saw the world, the weight she carried into every word, every performance, every moment, because none of it was accidental. Every hardship, every lesson, every moment that felt overwhelming at the time became part of something bigger, something meaningful, something real. And that's what people connected to. Not perfection, but truth. Because her story didn't feel distant. It didn't feel like something unattainable or unrealistic. It felt familiar, like something people had experienced in their own way. Different details, same emotions. And that's the thing about real stories. They don't belong to one person. They belong to everyone who feels them. Because in the end, this was never just about success. It was about survival, growth, transformation, and understanding something deeper than all of it. That pain doesn't disappear. It changes form. It evolves. It becomes something else over time. And the experiences that once felt like burdens can become the very things that define you. She wasn't supposed to stand out, wasn't supposed to be different, wasn't supposed to be remembered, and yet she was. Not because everything went right, but because so much went wrong. Because she took everything life gave her, the silence, the pressure, the loss, the confusion, and turned it into something real, something lasting. And that's what makes a story unforgettable. Not perfection, but truth. Raw, unfiltered, honest. Because at the end of everything, that's what people connect to. And maybe that's why her story still matters.